I moved to a quiet suburb of Los Angeles 3 years ago for work. Being so far from my family in Ohio, I usually go back home to visit them for the holidays. That year, I decided at the last minute to spend Thanksgiving alone at home. My family had gone to my aunt's house for the holiday, but I thought some peace and quiet sounded nice. On Thanksgiving Day, after my family left around noon, I started preparing my own little feast. I seasoned a turkey and put it in the oven to roast. The kitchen was soon filled with the aroma of the cooking turkey. I also chopped vegetables to make some side dishes. In the evening, I opened a bottle of white wine and sat down at the dining table to enjoy the bountiful dinner. On TV, they were replaying NFL games. I happily savored the meal as I thought to myself that spending Thanksgiving alone could also be fulfilling. Just then, the doorbell suddenly rang. I turned my head towards the door, wondering who that could be. No guests should be visiting tonight. I got up and walked to the foyer, peering out the peephole. There was a man standing outside in a black overcoat, his head lowered so I couldn't see his face. This struck me as odd. I lived at the end of the community and had never seen this man before. And tonight was Thanksgiving. Most people should be home with their families. I hesitated whether I should open the door, but the man seemed to sense my presence and started banging loudly on the door. "Who is it? What do you want?" I called out loudly. But the man did not reply, and kept banging on the door mechanically and forcefully. I was starting to feel unnerved. I warned in a stern voice again, "You better state your business, or I'm calling the cops." Just then, I thought I faintly heard the man muttering under his breath, repeating something like "let me in." I was petrified. This man was up to no good. I needed to call the police right away. Just as I turned to go back inside and grab my phone, I suddenly heard a loud thud from the backyard, followed by a heavy thumping sound of something landing. Someone had jumped over the fence and trespassed into my backyard. I was overwhelmed by fear like never before. This man probably wasn't alone, but had accomplices with him to hold me hostage. I switched off the lights in the living room, locked all the doors, then hid in the shower stall furthest inside the bathroom. I shut the glass door, waiting silently inside. I pricked up my ears, listening intently to any sound. After a few minutes, there was a sudden loud banging from outside, as if someone was trying to break in by force. I covered my mouth in shock, afraid any noise might give away my hiding spot. I could hear footsteps pacing back and forth in the bedroom and living room. The intruder must already be inside. With eyes closed, I dialed 911 with a shaking hand, whispering to the operator that an intruder had entered my home and to please send help immediately. Right then, the bathroom door was smashed open forcefully. I jumped, staring fixedly at the glass shower door. A tall dark figure appeared outside. I couldn't make out his face, but could confirm it was the same man who had knocked. He searched around the bathroom slowly, as if looking for something. I stifled my mouth in terror, afraid I might make a sound accidentally. At this life or death moment, I suddenly heard police sirens outside, followed by a heavy thud of something falling. Hearing the sounds, the dark figure bolted out of the bathroom instantly. I heard the front door open and slam shut, then everything went quiet again. I collapsed onto the shower floor, gasping for air. Just then, the bathroom door knocked, and I heard a policeman's voice. I came out and answered some brief questions from the police. Apparently, a neighbor had noticed suspicious figures entering my home and called 911. The police arriving so swiftly is what saved me. The other intruder, who had climbed in through the backyard window, tried to escape when police came but fell off the roof and injured his leg. He was apprehended at the scene. This sudden incident revealed a harsh truth that spending Thanksgiving alone might not be as safe or enjoyable as one imagines. I'm extremely grateful to the police and that kind neighbor for keeping me unharmed through this holiday. Perhaps this was a message from above that we all need others' help and care in life. And that is the true meaning of Thanksgiving. 2 years ago, on Thanksgiving, as a student who had just moved to Boston less than a year ago from a small Midwestern town, I found myself facing the holiday alone. Airfare was prohibitively expensive, and my academic workload was overwhelming. Consequently, I was left to spend Thanksgiving in my apartment, a world away from family and familiar traditions. That evening, with my roommates gone and a profound sense of solitude setting in, I decided to step out for a run. It seemed like a good way to shake off the growing feelings of loneliness. The streets of Boston, usually bustling, were now eerily quiet, with most residents inside, gathered around their dinner tables in celebration. I started my jog, passing through familiar streets and neighborhoods. The crisp autumn air was refreshing, but my mind was uneasy. I was lost in thoughts of home when I suddenly sensed something unsettling. Across the street, a man's figure caught my attention. His movements seemed deliberate, his gaze fixed on me. A chill ran down my spine. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but the sinking feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I quickened my pace, turning down a few alleys in an attempt to lose him. But each turn seemed to bring me closer to him, not farther away. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized he was no longer behind me, but somehow ahead of me, leaning against a tree with a disturbingly calm demeanor. Panic took over. I bolted, running faster than I ever had before, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the buildings. I glanced back to see the man now chasing me, gaining ground with each stride. I shouted for help, but my voice was lost in the empty streets. As I ran, my mind raced with fear and confusion. Why was this happening? Who was he? My thoughts were interrupted by the sight of a gas station ahead, a beacon of hope in my desperate situation. With the last bit of energy I had, I sprinted towards it, bursting through the door, gasping for air, and frantically explained the situation to the attendant. The attendant quickly locked the door and peered outside, but the man was gone, vanished as if he had never been there. The gas station became my temporary refuge. The manager offered to let me stay until I felt safe. As I sat there, my heart still racing, I couldn't help but feel exposed and vulnerable, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the man's face pressed against the window. After some time, feeling a bit more composed and believing the man had left, I made the decision to head back to my apartment. The streets felt even more ominous now, and every shadow seemed to hide potential danger. I kept a brisk pace, clutching my phone tightly, ready to call for help at the slightest sign of danger. Upon reaching my apartment, I quickly locked the door behind me, my hands trembling. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath, to convince myself I was safe now. But the sense of security was short-lived. As I moved away from the door, a tapping sound caught my attention. It was coming from the window. My heart sank as I cautiously approached, peering through the blinds. There, in the dim light, was the man from the street, his face obscured but unmistakably the same person. Fear gripped me like never before. I dialed 911, my voice barely a whisper as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. The wait for the police to arrive felt like an eternity. I watched from my vantage point as they searched the area, finally finding the man lurking in the shadows. The relief I felt when they took him away was indescribable, yet the incident left a lasting impact on me. This experience was a harsh reminder of the unpredictability and potential dangers of being alone, especially during a time when the world seemed to be celebrating. It taught me the importance of being aware of my surroundings and the value of community, even in a city as large as Boston. It also made me appreciate the simple comforts of home and the presence of loved ones, something I had taken for granted before. From that day on, I made a promise to myself to never let my guard down and to cherish the moments with those who matter most. Back when I was in college, it was Thanksgiving 5 years ago. At that time, all my roommates had gone home for the holiday, leaving me alone in a small apartment near the campus. Because of this, the entire building felt unusually quiet. I was a sophomore in college, just starting my independent life away from home for over a year. My roommates and I normally got along very well. We would cook together, go shopping, party. They had become my best friends here. I loved prepping a big Thanksgiving feast with them every year, dividing up tasks like roasting the turkey, making pies, etc. Then we'd sit around the table and enjoy the meal merrily. But this Thanksgiving, they were all back home with their families, and I was the only one left in the apartment. Being away from my familiar roommates, spending the holiday alone for the first time, I inevitably felt a bit lonely. I didn't have the energy to make a fancy dinner that day, just cooked some instant pasta to fill my stomach at noon. The table only had a pitiful one-person Thanksgiving meal, devoid of any holiday cheer. That night I was sitting on the couch bored, flipping channels on TV, but everything was repetitive programming, making me feel even more bored and empty. As I lay sprawled on the sofa staring at the ceiling, time seemed to pass so slowly. Just then, my phone suddenly rang. The caller ID showed it was my ex-boyfriend Jack. I was surprised because we broke up almost a year ago. I hesitated whether to take the call, but my phone kept persistently ringing. Jack was a junior I met in freshman year. We dated for a while before breaking up. The reason for the breakup was still fresh in my memory. I found that Jack was overly controlling and possessive, often not allowing me to participate in social activities or interact with other guys. He got really angry when I was just chatting normally with some other guys at a party. I couldn't tolerate this kind of relationship, so I decisively called for the breakup. I figured Jack must have a new girlfriend by now, so why would he call me suddenly on Thanksgiving? Maybe just a holiday greeting? But knowing his personality, I felt things weren't that simple. Right after I declined his last call, I was about to toss my phone aside when there was a loud thud outside the window, as if something had smashed heavily against the glass and cracked it. I was startled wide awake, all drowsiness gone. I got up cautiously and slowly walked over to look outside. It was late and the moonlight was faint. I could vaguely make out a figure of a man standing under the tree, still holding something in his hand. From the silhouette and build, I had an instinct that it was very likely Jack. Both shocked and angry, I immediately backed a few steps away from the window and called 911. I described the situation in a low voice and requested help. The operator quickly promised to dispatch officers to my location and told me to hide somewhere safe while waiting. I slipped into the closet, closed the door, and listened to my own accelerating heartbeat echoing in the darkness. I wasn't sure if Jack had left or was still lurking nearby. Recalling all his previous controlling behaviors, I couldn't help but feel deeply unsettled. After a few minutes, I heard the sound of the lock turning as someone entered the apartment. I stifled my mouth, trying hard to control my breathing patterns in case any sound gave me away. The footsteps paced around the living room, seemingly checking every room. As they approached my bedroom door, my heart almost jumped out. I'd be doomed if he found me here. Just then, I finally heard the life-saving police sirens getting closer and closer. The footsteps paused briefly as I guessed the intruder was assessing the situation. Soon he seemed to have decided to run, as he darted out of the apartment in just a few strides. I heard the front door swing open and slam shut, then everything went silent again, except my heavy breathing. After a couple more minutes, I heard a knock at the door and a policeman's voice. I carefully emerged from the closet, opened the door and talked to the officers. They arrived quickly to examine the broken window I reported. A brick lay beside it just as I described. I told them details about my ex Jack and his past controlling behaviors, requesting heightened alert to protect us girls. The policeman said they would investigate and advised me to move in and live with a friend for now alone, in case Jack tried to harm me. I thanked him for the advice and decided to call my roommate the next day to move in with them. I asked the police to increase patrols around our building at nights, and promptly notified my roommates about the incident. They were all very worried about my safety, and actively offered to come pick me up so I wouldn't have to live alone. This terrifying incident made me realize that extra safety precautions are needed when spending holidays alone. Perhaps loneliness is not as frightening as external dangers. Ever since, I've stopped spending Thanksgivings alone, instead returning home to family or celebrating with roommates. Some people may seem normal initially, but show violent tendencies after a breakup. I've decided to be extra vigilant about such red flags, and avoid unnecessary trouble from the start.